Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Alhamdulillah, you have stayed for section 4, inshallah. Section 4, we're now going to look at the question about the need for messengers. And we're going to talk about this in two parts. The first one we're going to talk about, which is where we're going to focus today, is the argument from Fitrah. So in the first section, or the second section, and sessions 2 and 3, we explored the question of whether the universe and all that it contained, including us, have a creator. We explored the various arguments for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and even some of the popular contentions against these arguments. Inshallah, hopefully we have concluded that there are very strong, rational reasons for not only believing that there is a necessary, independent, unlimited creator, but also a creator who is one and unique, as well as having a will and thus chose to create the universe. That the first question should now be answered. What was that first question, if you remember, when we talked about the person who wakes up in a desert? How did I get here? We wake up into existence. We went from non-existence to existence. We've answered that first question. How did I get here? Ultimately, without going into the discussions of mechanistics or the mechanistics or mechanical aspects or causations of the universe and its creation, we ultimately have answered the question by saying, ultimately the Creator created us and brought us into this life. But we also need to ask the next question. Okay, we are created, but were we created by the Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and told just to get on with life? In essence, is there guidance from this Creator after we have been created? Should we even look for the guidance, or should we just simply be satisfied that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, a Creator exists, that's it, I'm happy with the answer? Well, there's a few ways to answer this question. Firstly, if we cast our minds back to the second video in the first section, or first session, we discussed that in order to understand our purpose of life, when you wake up in that desert, in order to understand our purpose, we need to answer the question, how did we get here? And also, what's going to happen to us after we die? Where are we going? And it's only by answering this question do we create a unique moral and unique viewpoint on life. So we need to know, we still need to answer this question. Is there guidance? Did the Creator create us and just simply leave us? Or did the Creator create us and actually give us a guidance that we have to follow and tell us what's going to happen to us after we die? So clearly now, knowing that there is a Creator who chose to create the universe, we'd naturally ask the question whether there was a reason for this creation and what our role is within this universe, within this creation. That would necessitate us, force us to go out and look for any divine guidance. That point is further emphasized by various people claiming that they've received communication from the Creator. So that you go outside, people are all constantly claiming that there is a Creator, that not only there is a Creator, but that they have, revelation from this Creator, the guidance to tell us how to live our life, what to believe in, what's going to happen to us after we die. So we'd naturally look at some of these claims. That is something we discuss. That's something we'll discuss more in the next session. What is the evidences for these claims and how to assess it? Secondly, by establishing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, who chose to create, this naturally implies there's a purpose behind creation. Because we're not just talking about a necessary being that incidentally created the universe, but rather Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a creator with a will, and therefore chose through his knowledge and power to create the universe. That implies that there was a reason behind this creation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions in the Quran in translation, we created not the heavens and the earth and all that is in between them for mere play. Surah Al-Anbiya chapter 21 verse 16. So after knowing that the Creator decided to create us, it would be natural to ask the question, why did the Creator create us and what guidance is given to us? Therefore we're looking for communication. Third reason why we would look for a guidance is that humans have been created with a particular nature. As we call this the Fitrah, which means the innate, or as many scholars and ulama have said, it refers to the innate desire or the innate drive within human beings to seek worship. And I want to spend some time explaining the fitrah of the human being, what it means, and whether it can be rationally established that humans have this fitrah, either this innate desire to worship or this instinct to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or the Creator, and also, or whether this is something just simply established from the Quran and we just assume it and accept it. This will also add to the other evidences that we mentioned, why we need to seek a messenger or a message from the Creator. And I'm going to give you a quick example of this. It's an example from the time of the Salaf, from one of the scholars of the Salaf, Fitrah S4. And it was reported that he had a debate or a discussion with an atheist. And in this debate, he was trying to explain to the atheist that there is a natural innate desire in all human beings, including him as an atheist, to believe in a creator and a one God. And so Fitrah S4, he mentioned this point about being on a boat and the boat being caught in the storm. And the atheist said, you know what? That happened to me. I was on a boat and we were caught in a storm. And he said, when you were caught in a storm, did you lose hope or did you maintain hope? And he said, I maintained hope. I had hope in the ship and the crew to save me from this storm. So then he said, well, what else happened? So then the atheist said, well, then what happened was that the ship overturned and all the crew fell out and they were into the sea. And so there was no crew for me to depend upon. And so Fitrah S4, he said, did you lose hope or did you maintain hope? He said, I still maintained hope that the physical body of the ship would remain intact. But then what happened was that the ship began to be destroyed and torn apart. And so I'm now floating in the middle of the ocean, holding on to a plank of wood in order to stay afloat. And again, Fitrah S4 said, did you lose hope or did you maintain hope? And he said, I still had hope that this plank of wood would keep me afloat. And then he said, the atheist, he said, then suddenly the plank of wood, went from beneath me. And I was no longer supported by the plank of wood in the middle of the ocean, but I was still able to float. And then Fitrah S4 said, did you lose hope or did you still have hope? And he said, I still had hope. And then he said, upon whom did you place your hope? Because initially it was the crew, then the ship, then the plank of wood. And the atheist had to admit that his hope was placed upon the Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so this alludes to the nature within a human being, this conversation that took place. And this nature of the human being is also alluded to within the Quran itself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in the verse, Surah Yunus, verse 22, He it is who enables you to travel through the land and sea, to when you are in ships and they sail with them with a favorable wind, and they are glad therein. And then comes a stormy wind, and the waves come to them from all sides, and they think that they are encircled therein. They invoke Allah, making their faith pure for Him alone, saying, if you, Allah, delivers us from this, we shall be truly grateful. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions people upon a ship facing a stormy sea, and naturally they start to invoke upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's a famous saying that is mentioned, that there are no atheists on a sinking boat. It's a famous saying in the UK, maybe elsewhere as well. But there are no atheists on a sinking boat. And so what we can see is mentioned by Fitrah S4's conversation with the atheist, or mentioned in the Quran itself, or this saying, there are no atheists on a sinking boat, is that there is a nature in a human being that when they feel fear, they're in a difficult situation, then their natural reaction is to seek worship, or to seek, to sanctify, to glorify, or to connect with the Creator. In essence, what's happening when a person is facing a difficult situation, facing fear, is that they're facing a situation in which they feel weak, limited, and needy. And feeling this weak, limited, needy nature makes the person realize that they don't have control over the affairs. Normally we have this assumption that we're in control of what's happening, up until something happens that takes away that illusion, and we realize actually the control that we thought we had, the power that we thought we had, easily goes away from us. Maybe we're on a car, we're driving on the motorway or the highway, we're thinking we're fine, we're safe, and suddenly we hit a bump and we skid, or our tire blows out and we're unable to maintain control and our heart starts pumping. And maybe after some expletive words, you start saying, you start reciting the kalima or whatever, in order to reconnect. It's that natural reaction, that fear that pushes us, that lack of control that pushes us to want to sanctify. So we begin to see that whenever there is a situation of deep anxiety, deep problems, lack of control, that we seek out and we call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'm just going to give a couple of other examples of this. There's a famous footballer, or he's not that famous, but he was a footballer. His name was Ander Herrera. And Ander Herrera, before he used to go on the football pitch, he always used to put on his shin pads. And the shin pads was from when he was 13 years of age. Because for him, he believed that something within the shin pads was able to make him play as a better footballer. So what's going on in his mind? It's the same thing in regards to the person on the sinking ship. He's in a situation which he recognizes he lacks control. That there are things that are outside of his own factor, his own capacity to able to determine. So as a result, he's looking for something more than material, to appease something. In the same way, when you have people going into their exams, you find people will go in there with their lucky charms, lucky mascots, a lucky pen or whatever it is, that they're bringing them in. Now the reality is that these things don't have any intrinsic materialistic value to the exam itself, but it's because they feel that fear, the anxiety, the lack of control, the feeling of being weak, limited and needy, that pushes them to look for something more than material, to appease something that's more than material. And also as a brief example of this, or to extend the point, I remember also when I was doing my exams, or with other people, students who were doing their exams, the night before the exam, the point where you think, you know what, there's no much more revision I can do, people become very philosophical at that moment in time. They start asking questions about purpose of life, meaning, isn't there more to life? It's basically that innate nature, that fitrah, that's kicking in. So these seem very basic examples, but this addresses this underlying psychology that exists in all human beings. That human beings have an innate desire to seek something more than just what we see around us, more than the physical universe. And that this manifests mostly, or becomes most manifest, so it's always with us. We always feel this weak, limited, needy nature, but it becomes more manifest when we're in situations of hardship and difficulty, situations which are beyond or outside of our control. This pushes us to seek a higher power beyond the existence of nature. This is what we call the sanctification instinct, the spiritual instinct, or what we'd also term as the fitrah. Ultimately then, the fitrah drives us to seek out and worship this higher power beyond the physical universe. If this is a major part of the human nature, to have this desire to worship the higher power, then we'd see this across all cultures. So if it actually, what we're saying exists, everybody has this desire to worship, then it shouldn't just be some individuals. Rather, we should see it across all civilizations, all cultures, and across all times. And guess what? We actually do see this. We actually observe that for every time and for any civilization that we have studied, we observe that there's always something that's worshipped, some sort of deity or even deities that are worshipped. For example, you had the ancient Egyptians, and they would sacrifice virgin girls to the Nile in order to appease the god or gods, in order to make the Nile flow. Or some civilizations living next to a volcano may have sought to sacrifice or appease the gods, or deified the volcano in order to prevent the eruptions. For example, there's examples of, again, children being sacrificed on the base of a volcano in order to appease the volcano. The volcano is a material thing, but it's the assumption that it's somehow got something more than material that needs to be appeased, needs to be worshipped, needs to be sanctified in order to prevent this explosion from taking place, or the volcano from exploding. So we see that across all civilizations and cultures, religious practices have always been seen. From Europe to Africa, North and South America, from the Far East, Australasia regions, all of them have had civilizations and still have civilizations that continue to hold religious practices. Even those civilizations that claim to deny the existence of God and existence of religions have not been able to wipe away the spiritual desire within the people. For example, Soviet Union, when it was around, was predicated explicitly on an atheist ideology of communism. And it also tried to ban religious practices. So it was built upon communism, and it believed religion was the opium of the masses. So even in Muslim majority regions like of Soviet Union, like Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan today, they attempted to ban the Quran under communism. They closed the masajids down and would even check on whether people were waking up in the middle of the night, during the before Fajr time, during the Ramadan, to see if they're taking their pre-dawn meal, the suhoor. Yet with this attempt to ban religion within these countries and its expressions, Muslims still practiced their belief. There were still underground practices of Islam. In fact, even in Russia, when they tried to ban the Orthodox Christian Church, it was impossible. And Soviet Union reinstated the Orthodox Church, even though they're a communist country, back within Russia. So even those ideologies like communism that seek to deny the nature, and even those people who maybe even consider themselves ideologues, can never get away from the fact that they still believe, they still desire to satisfy or to seek that sanctification of their religious instinct or religiosity, that aspect of their fitrah. So for example, in Soviet Union, they preserved the body of Lenin. Why would you preserve the body of Lenin? For communism, Lenin's dead body is equivalent to a rock. It's just material. Why would they seek to preserve it? More than this, they would go and visit Lenin's body, and out of respect, they would make tawaf around it. They would go around it. Like the Muslims go make tawaf around the Kaaba, they would make tawaf around Lenin's body. So they're doing actions of what? Worship, sanctification. Similarly, in North Korea, where religious practices are in practice or impractically forbidden, they preserved the body of their former North Korean leader, Kim Il-sung. And not only that, they embalmed his body, and they put his body in a clear sarcophagus. Sarcophagus was what they used to bury people in Egyptian society, etc. And they used to bury them because of religious sentiment and religious practices. And his former residence, the former leader of North Korea, his former residence was termed a mausoleum. And he is also referred to as the eternal leader. How, it's amazing. Not only, are they preserving his body, showing his body off, calling the place of his, where he's buried the mausoleum, but they're also referring to him as the eternal leader. This is North Korea under communism. So what's very clear is that even in societies that seeks to ban religious expression and religion and claims to be predicated upon atheism, cannot and do not actually remove that natural instinct, that natural fitrah within the human beings. So not only do we see across all civilizations across the planet in all various times that demonstrate that people are born with the innate desire to worship, but also we have academics that have determined that actually this desire to worship is something that has been empirically observed within human beings, through studies and psychological studies and anthropological studies. For example, Professor Roger Trigg, who's from the University of Oxford, said, and he was talking about the research he did about religion across different civilizations and culture. Is it acquired from the society or was it innate? And he said religion was not just something for a peculiar few to do on Sundays instead of playing golf. We have gathered a body of evidence that suggests that religion is a common fact of human nature across different societies. This suggests that attempts to suppress religion are likely to be short-lived, as human thought seems to be rooted to religious concepts, such as existence of supernatural agents or gods or God, and the possibility of an afterlife or pre-life. And another individual writer, Graham Lawton, who himself is an atheist and a writer at the New Scientist, he said about various studies that have taken place. He said they point to studies showing, for example, that even people claim to, and before I mentioned the quote, he's talking about a study that says that even atheists are not really atheists. Yeah, that atheists themselves implicitly still hold on to religious beliefs. And so he said, they point to studies showing, for example, that even people who claim to be committed atheists tacitly hold religious beliefs such as the existence of an immortal soul, as an example. So this is implicit. Another academic, Dr. Justin Barrett, a senior researcher at the University of Oxford Centre for Anthropology and the Mind, claims that young people have a predisposition to believe in a supreme being because they assume that everything in the world is created with a purpose. Like we said, it's intuitive to look for certain questions of why certain things exist, and it's intuitive to assume that actually the universe was created with a purpose, with certain laws, and therefore there must be a lawgiver who's given it laws and therefore a particular purpose. He states, this is Dr. Justin Barrett, he said the preponderance of scientific evidence for the past 10 years or so has shown that a lot more seems to be built into the natural development of children's minds than we once thought, including a predisposition to see the natural world as designed and purposeful, and that some kind of intelligent being is behind that purpose. Now, there have been various hypotheses put forward in an attempt to explain why religious beliefs are innate within human beings. For example, you had Dean Hamer, who's claimed that there are genes that can code for spirituality. And we have others that claim that religiosity developed as an evolutionary trait in order to help with survival. The point here is this, is that the Creator is the ultimate creator and sustainer as well of all that exists, including then human beings, then ultimately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, no matter what the mechanism is, created us with the innate instinct to seek to worship. Therefore, the instinct created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or God, in order to push us and drive us to worship, inevitably means we've ultimately been pre-programmed with this desire to seek out and worship our Creator. Seeking out and worship to a higher being would inevitably entail a desire to worship the one true Creator. Why the one true Creator? Because this is a fact that we've established through an intellectual process. So our mind comes to the conclusion that there's one Creator, independent, unlimited being, and therefore we have within ourselves this desire to want to worship. So it naturally fits hand in glove that the one that we should be worshipping is the one true Creator who has control over all things. But our question becomes, well, how do we satisfy this worship? Do we just worship the way we want? Do we submit in any way we want and seek the pleasure in the Creator, of the Creator in what we think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us? Well, no, obviously not. Firstly, it makes no sense. If we have this desire to worship, in other words, a desire to submit to the Creator, to sanctify the Creator, then how can we submit to the Creator's will if we are deciding how to submit? By definition, you're not submitting if you're making the choice to submit. So that's not actually submitting. Secondly, how come our minds, which are limited, finite, that can't comprehend the unlimited and the infinite and beyond the universe, we cannot comprehend the nature of the Creator, know what will please the Creator? So both of these arguments necessitate that there must be a communication from the Creator. We are created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a desire to worship and submit. This is the fitrah of the human being, and we've gone through various evidences and proofs to demonstrate that it's a rational observation of the human condition, that we can prove this. So we have this desire to worship and submit. We can't work out how to submit. We can't work out how to please the Creator. We don't know what pleases the Creator, what pleases our Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hence, we will have to seek out a guidance from the Creator. It makes logical and rational sense that there would be a communication, therefore, that we should seek out in order to understand how to worship the Creator and therefore how to fulfill our nature, the fitrah, which is the religious instinct or the desire to worship.